Papoose is the wealthiest man that I've been with. And that's like no faking. I haven't paid for a flight, a hotel, a fucking purse, nothing, and I don't know how long. Food, he take care of everything.
It all starts in a way that doesn't feel like the beginning of a big scandal. It feels like just another interview, another couch conversation, another celebrity moment that people will scroll past and forget in a few hours. But what actually happened in that space didn't stay small for long. It spread fast, and the way it spread made it feel like something deeper had been exposed without anyone fully realizing it in the moment. Claressa Shields was sitting in what looked like a relaxed podcast setup, soft lighting, calm energy, casual conversation, the kind of environment where people usually open up a little too comfortably. And that's exactly what seemed to happen. The conversation moved toward relationships and future plans, the kind of topics that usually stay controlled, rehearsed, safe. But in this case, something slipped through. She mentioned in the middle of talking that Papoose had been pushing the idea of having a child. Not in a distant someday way, but in a way that sounded immediate, intense, like something's being actively discussed behind closed doors. The moment those words came out, the tone of the entire conversation shifted. It didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt like something personal had accidentally been made public. Almost instantly, she tried to smooth it over. She adjusted her words, softened the meaning, clarified that they both plan to have kids eventually. But the internet doesn't unhear things like that, especially not when the first version sounded more raw than the correction that followed. And that's where everything started to grow beyond that single clip. People didn't just watch it once. They replayed it. They slowed it down. They analyzed the tone, the hesitation, the timing of her correction, and slowly a narrative started forming outside of her control. A narrative that suggested that what she said the first time might have been closer to the truth than the version she corrected it into. From there, the conversation expanded. Old clips started resurfacing, old interviews, old live stream comments from people connected to the same circle. And suddenly, this wasn't just about Claressa anymore. It became a web of past statements, emotional reactions, and overlapping claims that people began stitching together online. One of the names that kept coming back into the conversation was Remy Ma. People started recalling older live stream moments where she had expressed frustration and emotional pain related to her past relationship with Papoose. In those resurfaced discussions, there were mentions of pressure around family expectations and personal conflicts that people now felt might be connected to what Claressa had just accidentally revealed. Whether everything was directly connected or not almost stopped mattering at that point, because the internet wasn't just collecting facts anymore. It was building a pattern, and in that pattern, Papoose became the center of attention. As more clips resurfaced, people began pointing out contradictions. In one moment, he was speaking about boundaries and privacy, especially when it came to children and family. In another, he was allegedly being described in clips and commentary as pushing strongly for a new child in his current relationship. Those two ideas started clashing in the public's mind. That clash created tension in the narrative, because now the story wasn't just about love or relationships. It was about control, timing, and intention. People started asking why someone would push for a child so urgently when other parts of their public and private life seemed unstable. Others started questioning whether the conversations being shared publicly were revealing emotional pressure behind the scenes that had never been acknowledged directly. And while all of this was building online, the people involved were still moving through their lives, still posting, still appearing on platforms, still responding in fragments instead of full explanations. But that didn't slow the narrative down. It accelerated it. Because silence in situations like this doesn't stop speculation. It feeds it. As the conversation expanded, another layer entered the picture. The idea that this wasn't just a relationship story anymore. It was a pattern story. A story about repeated behavior being interpreted through multiple voices and multiple timelines. People began connecting not just Claressa and Papoose, but also Remy Ma's past statements, past tensions, and past emotional reactions. Suddenly, everything looked like it belonged to one continuous storyline in the eyes of the internet, even if real life doesn't actually work that neatly. And that's where the emotional weight of the situation started to grow, because now there were multiple perspectives floating around. Claressa's version from the podcast moment, Remy Ma's older emotional commentary, Papoose's past interviews where he spoke about boundaries and personal life, and then the audience in the middle trying to interpret everything like pieces of a puzzle that may not have been designed to fit together. In that confusion, people started assigning meaning. Some saw pressure, some saw misunderstanding, some saw manipulation, others saw coincidence being turned into narrative. But regardless of which side people took, one thing was clear. The story had moved beyond entertainment. It had become emotional for the audience. And once that happens, it becomes harder for any clarification to reset it. Because by now, the story wasn't just about what was said on that couch. It was about everything people believed was behind it. As the discussion intensified, attention also shifted toward the idea of contradictions in personal desires. Claressa had, in other contexts, expressed hesitation about pregnancy and motherhood, describing fear and uncertainty around it. That made the podcast moment even more complicated in the eyes of viewers because it didn't fully align with the idea of immediate pressure being described. That contradiction became a central talking point. People started asking whether she was being pressured, whether she was being misunderstood, or whether two different versions of the same relationship reality were being presented at different times for different audiences. And in the middle of that, the story stopped being linear. It became layered, fragmented, and emotionally charged. At the same time, side conversations started appearing. People connected to the broader circle began speaking in live streams, posting reactions, or hinting at behind-the-scenes tension. One of those voices, according to online clips, came from Claressa's extended circle, which added another layer of unpredictability to the situation. Now, it wasn't just the main people involved. It was family, friends, and surrounding voices all feeding into the same narrative space. And every new voice added another angle, another interpretation. Another reason for people to keep watching. But what made the situation even more intense was the realization that none of this existed in isolation. Every new clip, every old interview, every resurfaced live stream was being absorbed into a single growing storyline that the internet had decided to keep alive. And in that storyline, there was no clear ending yet, just more questions forming every day. Why was there pressure around timing? Why did different voices tell different versions of the same emotional experience? Why did past statements suddenly feel connected when they were never originally presented that way? And most importantly, where does truth actually sit in a situation where so many perspectives exist at once? The story doesn't answer those questions clearly. It never really does. Instead, it keeps expanding, pulling in more reactions, more interpretations, more emotional responses from people watching it unfold in real time. And as the conversation moves forward, it becomes less about finding a single truth and more about understanding how quickly private emotions can turn into public narratives that no one fully controls anymore. Because at this point, what started as a simple podcast moment has turned into something much larger. A chain reaction of clips, claims, memories, and interpretations that keep feeding into each other. And the deeper it goes, the more it feels like this story was never just about one moment being exposed. It's about everything that moment unlocked. And even now, it still doesn't feel finished.